Thank you all for watching the show with In-House Genetics yesterday. We were touching on an important subject about cannabis legalization and home grow rights, and for some reason, YouTube cut our stream. Now, there's some good speculation of why that happened, but I have no solid reason. And to not be defeated, I wanted to make sure that you all got to see the end of the interview that I did with Branden from In-House Genetics. So, without further ado, let's finish the show. Oh. If you missed part one, the link is down in the show description.
I think that's if you had that, we would have a way better system here in Washington if something like that resembles that. So I love that. I love that idea.
And that just kind of ties back into, the craft beer we were talking about earlier. We're in the Pacific Northwest where craft beer really launched. So it is a model that we've seen go from that corner little pub guy brewing his stuff to a national model where now a lot of those early craft brews are bought up by Molson's or Miller or whoever at this point. But it also gave those people generational wealth sometimes, I guess you could say. That's not necessarily my goal, although I would never turn it down.
Well,
I would.
What they did, so with the craft thing, what ended up happening is the bigger guys realized they couldn't really compete with the craft growers. So what they had to do is they had to come in and absorb them or buy them, and then either shelve them or run and operate under that brand, because it took away from because they couldn't do it themselves. They had to go buy somebody that could do that, right? That's just that's what it more like as an example. Elysian used to be an independent brewery. InBev came in and bought them, changed everything up. But the thing is with that is like when you think about with the beer industry, they can't patent an IPA. They can't patent, so you can have different flavors. And just because they bought that one doesn't mean that another one's going to spring up, or somebody in their garage right now has the next best big thing when it comes to craft beer. That should be the same on the flip side with cannabis, right? The guy that's been working on all sorts of different crosses. He's not a breeder. He's just trying to find different traits and different expressions that he's really loving and enjoying, or her, should I say, too. And so they're gonna introduce that to the world, or then to their friends or whatever, and people are gonna find joy. They're gonna find happiness to it, and then that gets shared with somebody else, and that gets passed along with somebody that that has like a platform, or has can get a real good word out there, grabs it and says, "You guys, look at this. I haven't seen this in a long time." And that's how things shift and move, because in a lot of it's a good combination of what you know and who you know, in order to get to where you're going. But extremely to your point though, is that they're always gonna capitalists are gonna capitalize, right? But it doesn't change the fact that there's still room and still for everybody to be in there.
It does, and what they paid for with the craft brews, and what I hope they pay for with some small craft cannabis, if it does come to that, is really just it's the intellectual property. That is our biggest asset that we've acquired over years of doing this, of years of looking at different plants. It's that ability to select or do things in a certain way that can bring out special expressions that they don't have the time, understanding, or just capacity to do, just because it eats into their bottom line. So there are some magic things that certain people do to bring out some expressions, and that is ultimately what I think they're after. But they're never going to be able to duplicate that. So that's where I really see the craft always surviving, and that starts with the farm to table or farmers market type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably last is just the normalization of it. I still don't tell people what I do. It's so hard to keep my life straight of what do you do for a living with all the neighbors and the people in town. I'm just like, I do this, I do that. I talk about cannabis openly as much as I can, but I'm also able to read my audience. And I know that if I start being passionate or as educational as I can be, nothing else that comes out of my mouth they will listen to. It's just that stigma that's still with it. You know, again, we're talking beers, and like, I don't really want beer gardens at a cannabis event. But yet there still is. You can still walk down the beach or anywhere with your beer.
Yeah.
I can't do that with my joint.
Well, it's like you're normalizing it. Like, like one thing, I was in a grocery store recently, and it had a bag that said something like mom's wine or mom's juice or something like that.
Yeah,
But it was at
I
kid
know what
level
you're
height,
talking about.
right? So it's at kid level height. They're in the QFCs here. They're like at a low level. And then when you see, like, people, I want cannabis to be, especially with the women demographic, just as acceptable as down in a bottle of wine, right? Or mommy needs a wine, or whatever it is, but because it's a double standard there in a sense, right?
Yeah.
In the stigma. But yeah, I've never censored myself, so I don't care who's around me. I don't care if you're anti-cannabis or whatever. If you want to take it up with me or you want to shut down, then so be it. But don't get mad at me if I make fun of you about it, right? Where it's like, I'm sorry, my openness is getting in making your ignorance show, right?
Yeah.
But
People
also,
don't like that.
I have this, there's like, it's more, because to me, you're not going to change anything, right? You're not going to change your shift up. Where I think some people feel that they have to do that because they still have that old feeling, like we talked about earlier, the old, like hush hush type of stuff, where you just sometimes you just get to the point in your life where you're like, yeah, I'm going to rip out the filter. I'm just going to say whatever. I'm going to see where it goes. But if somebody asks me what I do, I'm going to explain it to them. I'm going to tell them, right? And say, hey, this this is what I do. But where other people, they'll be like, hush hush, because also too, it's like, well, in March 2020, I was considered essential. We got a piece of paper and everything. So
Yeah.
so from here on out, you ain't telling me any different. But in all seriousness, though, yeah, it is sad to see some people censor themselves, that it is still hush hush or stigma and this and that. And also too, I usually I let people, but I'll try to educate them along the way. Some people, you'll say something and they'll go, oh, actually, you know what? I didn't think of it that way. And then you have some people that are just like, you're never gonna change their mind or anything like that. And like one, it was a conversation they had. We were on the road, and the guy told me that pot ruined his brother's life. Right? He can't hold a job down. He can't hold a job down. He can't do this. He can't do that. And I said, I take it you're the older brother? And he's like, yeah. And I said, he's the younger brother? He's like, yeah. So he was pampered and babied as a kid while you had to get up and take out the trash and do all the chores and all that shit. So you learned a work ethic. It sounds like to me your brother's just fucking lazy, And it wasn't me trying to. It was just like when I assessed it, like when he was telling me, that's what the assessment. I just spit it out to him, and he was pretty mad about that assessment. But it was. But you could tell it was like it kind of hit on, right? Because that's how a lot of it is. If you're the second child, you get coddled and you get babied, right? If you're the first kid, you got to really, really toughen it out,
Yeah. It reminds me of a parallel situation here, and that was this person's story. It was the mayoral debate. I always have had a hard time saying that, mayoral debate in our town. And I've always been, since I was a teenager, I would like punk music. So I've always paid attention to politics and how your freaking world is shaped. So I went to it. I just wanted to hear what the candidate said. And there was there's a moratorium on cannabis shops in this town. You can't have them. But that was one of the questions that came up to all of the candidates. There were 5 of them. 4 of them were like, sure, that's fine. I don't see a problem with it. The other one was so far left field, literally said that drugs and cannabis cause people to walk into traffic. And he said a few things that actually made the room chuckle. So at the end of it, I didn't raise my hand at that point because one of the other candidates is the county sheriff. So I went up and talked to this person individually. And the first thing I did, like I was saying, I had to make that determination of how much breath to use on this person, because if he's open to listening, if he's open to maybe thinking about what I'm saying, cool. He absolutely wasn't. I I said, it basically got to the point where I looked at him, I'm like, I'm high right now. I got
Yeah.
stoned before I came here. Okay. How
Yeah.
am I a bad citizen?
Well, it's like one of the things is I know a guy that owns a couple of retails here in Washington, right? And he watches the lives. He engages in the lives, watches them, and he hit me up one day and was like, "Hey, the because I was speaking his language because he dabbles in some of the microbrew and the craft brew, and he goes, the way that you were talking about how craft brew and the cannabis industry could really take a lot from that really made sense. And he goes, because up until then, he goes, I used to think a home grower situation would take away from my retail, but now the way that you said it and all that, it would actually benefit. It was like, it was kind of one of those things where it was cool because he felt compelled to call me and let me know that it changed his mind, But
Cool.
I was like, I said, I'm just trying to get the information out there to people, and so that to get them to think of it differently. But also, too, it was pretty cool though, because when you have somebody that was set on something and they realize, hey, my position was wrong on that, right? And that's really all it takes is, once one person falls, then it's like, oh, you know what, I was wrong. Because the thing is we, you can be wrong, right? I mean, we could be wrong about the medicinal aspects of cannabis, but all the research is telling us to the contrary, right? So until you can start reversing, all that stuff, then we got to go with the facts, not alternative facts, not feelings, none of that stuff, So the consensus is starting to come out that this is, cannabis and hemp are great for the body, and also too, come to find out, hey, we used to the ropes that brought everybody here on the ships, right, was made out of hemp, right? But we stopped making it, and we, let's make it out of synthetics, and let's just get a big old pile of plastic there in the ocean, But even when I said on the James Loud podcast, like, we want to treat this place like a garbage can. We don't have to worry about fixing it because the earth will fix itself. One way or the other. It doesn't matter. It'll do it with us or without us. It's So
George Carlin he's a comedian that I love. He's got a rad skit about it. He's like, save the whales, fuck that, save the humans. We're the ones in trouble. The earth will be fine. It'll just start a new paradigm of the earth plus plastic. So that'll be the new world.
Hey, look, all that, I don't think you understand. Earth is one big recycling facility, right? Takes it back down, turns it back into the molten rock, and then spits it back out, through the volcanoes and the subductions, right? So no, it one way or the other, it'll correct itself. It's just a matter of we want to be on the ride or not. And I think also too, the time is, a lot of people don't realize the gaps of time. The difference between 10,000 and a million is huge. The gap between a million and a billion is just astronomical, right? And then a billion to a trillion is even crazier, right? Yeah. So when you're talking on that scale, like a billion years, right? Or 2 billion years. Like, they're saying like somebody was telling me like, oh yeah, the Earth's gonna blow up in an estimated 1.2 billion. I said, first of all, how do you even know that, right?
Why do I care?
Right? And another thing too, why in the hell would you worry about it? Like, you ain't gonna be here, right? But yeah, it was just a funny conversation because it was just more or less like, did you really just say that? Like we should be concerned about that, Like, yeah. So, but yeah, no, it's but like I said, until you're proven, but you're always going to have ignorance, and the only thing you can really do is just be factual in what you're saying and rational. Now, some people, are just irrational, or they're just like, they're not gonna hear you. But it's the ones that do want to listen is the ones that you're going to actually end up hitting and talking to, and especially like this type of stuff, because this gets put in an algorithm. And then people that are curious about it come across these clips and come across this stuff, and then that's where, like, hey, this Chad Westport guy in this podcast makes sense. That's how conversations start, right? And I hear too, like, people will be like, oh, you hear this podcast, you see that podcast, and it's like, I live in the world of podcasting. So if I'm working, right, I'm either listening to a podcast or listening to something, and or whatever. That but also, spend way too much time media stuff and listening to media. But also too, we're starting to see some really cool stuff in that space. You got the LMC out there putting in really good work on the documentaries, right? This content that is basically centered around this culture and lifestyle and all that. And I really feel as cannabis is 100% lifestyle, and you could base a whole lifestyle around that, and also shake that stigma of the stoner type of. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Some of the not I've mentioned it earlier. Some of the best growers, but not just that. Some of the brightest, smartest people I know, out there, that have taken it upon themselves. Like there's, I think Shabbat out of a Boston area, right? She got
Boston
PhD.
Bob?
What's that?
Boston Bob?
No, I think her name's Siobhan.
Oh.
I'll send it to you. Her name just escapes me at the moment. And then you have a few of these people that they have PhDs behind their name, and they're getting heat in their field because they're coming out, showing that they not only do they have the knowledge, but it helped them in their healing process, and they're sharing it with the rest of the world. And then they're going to have their other doctors and other people look down on them, but they're like, "Hey, this worked for me. I'm living proof of this. How can you discount me this?" And then, and you're starting to see that.
It's like, how can you tell me I didn't live this? I didn't experience it. How can you tell me that I didn't?
Yeah.
And maybe is it Dr. Mayabi Shields?
Mayabi Shields, that's it. Yeah.
She's awesome. She's been on this channel a lot.
Then there's another one out there, is Rashad Hodges, right? He was a family practitioner, and then found cannabis late, and they realized that he didn't, it's like alternative painkillers and stress management and all that. And he's so he's come out of late. So yeah, I don't know why I butchered her name. I love her videos. I love the content that she puts out because she's so informative. It just sucks because the name escapes me, but there's a few of those people that every time they put up a video, it's cool to watch because you're just like, oh yeah, I gotta watch this whole thing over, and I'm gonna hit the save button because I'm gonna come back to it,
and maybe that's that is kind of a goal for me too, because I experience what you're describing right now, and it's like I like to watch things that I can leave feeling smarter, or entertain. I don't want to leave feeling dumber than when I started, and sometimes that can happen. So there is a lot of great content out there where it can open my mind, it could reconfirm some of the things I know, but there's a lot of learning opportunities out there. And I'm that kind of sicko who will give a person an opportunity to explain something that seems very outlandish to me. I'll be like, okay, why? What do you have to support that? And that's usually where a lot of these arguments fall apart, but I'm always there to listen. And that's what we're kind of talking about with cannabis. Like to like flip the script, it's like, there's a lot of great things with cannabis, medicinal potentials, life lessons, such as, patience, that people just dismiss offhand because that's blasphemy. There's no way. But if you would take the time, or at least allow me the time, I would love to provide some foundation for that, why this is. And that is what we need to get back to, I think, as far as just like conversation for the acceptance of cannabis. Well, it's one thing to have an opinion, but you have to be able to articulate it to persuade a mind that is already against it.
Yeah, when somebody says, well, it's just like there's 43,000 people that would disagree with you that it's not medicine, and that would be the people that are prescribed Epidiolex, right? That a cannabinoid, right, derived from the cannabis plant or a hemp plant, is giving them a better outlook on life, right? Yeah. But that's where it comes to, is like the studies are there, the proof is there. It's becoming more and more prevalent. It's becoming a thing, but until they can, ultimately where I'm afraid that it goes is they're going to synthesize it and become synthetics, and that's where you run into a problem. When you synthesize nature is where you have the side effects and you have the crazy shit, people eating the faces and all of that stuff. That actually terrifies me, them going that action, But yes, but also to like educating people and getting that, and sometimes it takes a couple of interactions or a couple times people being faced with the reality to realize, actually, yeah. But also the gravity of when it comes time for them to to look outward at something else because what they were told was a lie, or they were, the doctor can't help them or anything like that. That's all of a sudden it just sucks that it has to get to that reality. But that's how it gets changed is human nature. People, whether it's you, your loved one, or your kid, or whatever, you'll go to the ends of the earth to make it happen and do it at any stake. And so, yeah, and I think that also it's great because there's a lot of people that benefited from the dispensary model throughout all the states where they're like, oh, I can go get some, RSO or FECO or something like that. I'm feeling better. I'm giving me an appetite. Because it's really important to be, especially anytime you have an issue or you're sick with something, staying hydrated and fed is critical and huge because your body is trying to heal itself. So sometimes it won't tell you that it's hungry or that it's thirsty, So if you got something that with there, something's going to be like, that it doesn't have a side effects or residual effect, then that's a better alternative to that, and especially. I'm excited to see where the psilocybin and cannabis in relation to mental health that's starting in the infancy of discussion and where that can go, because I think psilocybin in the long run could actually ultimately replace antidepressants. And one of the worst things on the market right now is antidepressants. Not to say that they don't help people, not to say that it's got its benefits. But also, too, there's studies that showing that it's changing the chemical makeup of it in your brain, and which is dangerous on numerous levels. So you want to be able to provide, or at least have people have options, to alternatives on that, and because maybe not everybody really feels like their solution is in a pill.
Psilocybin, and you touched on one of my favorite arguments that I will typically go to people who are staunchly opposed to cannabis, any type of research. I'm like, look, at Sativex, Epidiolex, there's a few other drugs, pharmaceuticals out there. I mean, they're Marinol, there's synthesized THC, synthesized CBD. But my point there is like, without this cannabis plant, we would have never found the pathway to help this person. Like the ECS, endocannabinoid system, is a great example. It's because of cannabis we really discovered this. And the more we discover about it, the more we realize it may be responsible for a variety of functions in our body. So if you're staunchly opposed to cannabis and you want to take that pill, that's not my choice. That's fine for you. But don't knock cannabis, because cannabis may have made the pill that is helping you today. So open up the research.
Well, it's just the choice in the matter, right? If somebody wants to try an alternative or try something, you shouldn't knock them for looking for a different thing, because it's like it's not for everybody. So like sometimes it's not for everybody. So they're going to look for something different or whatever. Because if you just did what everybody else did, then But again, like I said, traditional medicine doesn't help everybody. So these alternatives have to be explored into great lengths, because the pharmaceutical aspect doesn't work with this smaller group. Just as we were talking about earlier, cannabis doesn't necessarily have the same effect on everybody, right? And it's not for everybody, but for the vast majority, it is, right? And there's not a death attributed to it with its direct, use. That's the where compared to everything else, is, it will take you out. So like one of the crazy things that from 2017 to last year, 387 FDA approved pharmaceuticals have been removed from the list. That means they went through all the protocols and said it was safe. 387 of them, right? Have been removed. So that's pills, medication, medical devices, all that. That means that it hurt somebody or killed somebody or made people sick, right? That's crazy.
To a serious degree, because they don't act if it's just an individual.
Yeah, like there's a really I don't know if you watch Netflix or not, but there's a really great documentary on Netflix, and it shows the pathway of how OxyContin became a serious epidemic in this country. And there was one FDA official that was adamant against not letting it be prescribed in the way that it ultimately being prescribed. And that guy was holed up in a hotel for like 3 days, and then he came out and was like, you know what? Go for it. And then the heroin epidemic and everything else after that, like it all goes back to that overprescribing medications. One of the funniest commercials on the war on drugs that I've ever saw was the guy standing out in front of the corner store, and he's like, "Hey, you want some weed?" And the kids are just walking by on their, and they're walking by or riding by on their bikes and their skateboards, and he's like, I just can't compete anymore. And he's all complaining to the camera, and he's like, how am I going to be able to compete when they can just go grab the pills right out of their mom's purse? It's messed up. Nobody buying from the street dealer no more. I got to pull this up. I just remember it sticking out because remember the corny, like, here's your brain.
Oh, yeah.
Here's your brain. But yeah, it was
watching you.
This was an actual commercial on TV that when I first saw it, I was dying. But yeah, he was like, how can I compete when they can just go in their mom's purse and get those pills, And it was a PSA for like lock up your pills and all that stuff, right? Yeah. But it was a serious thing,
It's true though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but whoever did that marketing, it didn't really stay popular because the pharmaceutical companies were like, get rid of it.
Walk to Westport.